The apartment was silent, save for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I sat on the edge of our bed, my hazel eyes fixed on the mirror in front of me. My reflection stared back, tired, distant, not the woman I used to be. My long dark hair framed a face I barely recognized. Behind me, Daniel leaned against the doorway, his phone in hand, scrolling as if I wasn't even there. "Do you even notice how far we've drifted?" I finally asked, my voice soft. Without looking up, he scoffed. "Not this again," he muttered. And just like that, the fragile hope I'd clung to crumbled into silence. I thought back to how we used to be, before the silence crept in and made a home between us. Daniel had always been magnetic, lean, confident, and utterly captivating. His wavy black hair and piercing brown eyes had drawn me in the moment we met, and for a while, it felt like I was his entire world. Now that intensity was gone. It had been replaced by distraction and detachment, the kind of distance that felt unbridgeable no matter how hard I tried. Dinner that night was supposed to be my way of reconnecting with him. I'd made his favorite pasta, carefully setting the table and lighting a few candles. When Daniel walked through the door, his jacket draped over his shoulder and his phone already in hand, my heart gave a small flutter. I hated how he still had that effect on me. "I made pasta," I said, smiling nervously as he walked into the kitchen. "Thanks," he muttered absently, grabbing a beer from the fridge without even glancing at the table. He leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone as if I wasn't even there. I sat across from him, the knot in my stomach tightening as the silence stretched on. "Dan, can we talk?" I finally asked. "About what?" he replied, not even looking up. I hesitated, my hands twisting together in my lap. "About us. I feel like we've been off lately." He sighed, setting his phone down. "Elena, you're overthinking again. We're fine." His words felt like a slap, but I swallowed my frustration. "But I don't feel fine," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. Daniel shrugged. "You're making problems where there aren't any. Not everything needs to be analyzed, Elena. Sometimes things just are." I stared at him, my chest tightening. I wanted to tell him how lonely I felt, how much I missed the way we used to laugh and talk for hours. But I already knew how he'd react. He'd dismiss me, just like always. So instead, I nodded. "Okay," I whispered, letting the silence win again. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Daniel scrolled through his phone beside me. My chest ached with all the things I wanted to say, but the words felt too heavy to speak. Daniel set his phone down and turned toward me, his hand sliding over my waist. "You're tense," he murmured, his voice low and smooth. "Let me help you relax." I wanted to pull away, to tell him that sex wasn't the solution to what was breaking between us. But his lips brushed against my neck, and I melted under his touch. Daniel's hands moved with practiced confidence, sliding under my camisole to explore my body. His kisses were deliberate, leaving a trail of heat down my neck and collarbone. "Let me take care of you," he whispered, his voice thick with desire. I turned to face him, my hazel eyes meeting his dark, intense gaze. For a moment, I wanted to ask him if he really saw me, but his lips claimed mine before I could speak. His kiss was commanding, consuming, leaving no room for thought. As he moved over me, his lean, athletic frame pressing me into the mattress, I surrendered to the intensity of his passion. His hands gripped my hips, pulling me closer, his rhythm leaving me breathless. The way he whispered my name, the way he possessed me, sent shivers through my body. But even as my body responded to him, my mind drifted. When it was over, Daniel lay beside me, smirking. "See? You just needed that," he said, his tone smug. I turned away, my chest hollow. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee untouched as I waited for Daniel to come in. When he finally did, his hair slightly disheveled and his shirt half-buttoned, I gathered my courage. "Dan, can we talk?" I asked quietly. He poured himself a cup of coffee, leaning casually against the counter. "What is it now?" I feel like something's missing between us," I said carefully. He raised an eyebrow. "Missing? Elena, we have a good life. What more could you possibly want?" "It's not about things," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It's about how we feel. I don't feel like we're connected anymore." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Elena, do you know how many couples would kill to have what we have? You're comparing us to some perfect fantasy that doesn't exist." "I'm not comparing us," I insisted, my chest tightening. "I'm just trying to tell you how I feel." "Well, maybe you should stop feeling so much," he snapped. The words hit me like a slap, and I blinked back tears. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" he demanded, his voice sharp. I shook my head, retreating into silence. No matter how hard I tried to explain myself, it always came back to this. Him deflecting, me retreating, and nothing ever changing. As Daniel turned back to his coffee, I swallowed the lump in my throat and excused myself, the ache in my chest growing heavier. That night, Daniel came home late. I was already in bed when he climbed in beside me, his hands sliding over my body without a word. "You're mine," he murmured, his teeth grazing my neck. My breath hitched as he pushed me onto my back, his dark eyes blazing with intensity. His hands gripped my wrists, pinning them above my head as his lips claimed mine. His movements were fierce, unrelenting, leaving no room for hesitation. I surrendered to him completely, my body responding eagerly, even as my heart ached. Daniel's touch was electric, his whispered words of possession sending shivers down my spine. The sex was raw and passionate, his dominance leaving me breathless. But even in the throes of pleasure, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something was still missing. When it was over, Daniel pulled me close, his breathing steady. "I love you," he murmured, his lips brushing against my forehead. I closed my eyes, willing myself to believe him. Weeks passed, and nothing changed. Every attempt I made to talk about our relationship ended the same way, with him dismissing me, blaming me, or shutting me down entirely. The weight of it all was suffocating. One night, after yet another argument, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through my phone. An article caught my eye. Signs of emotional neglect in relationships. My chest tightened as I read the words. Emotional neglect is a form of abuse. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew it was true. The next morning, I stood in the doorway of Daniel's office, my heart pounding. He looked up from his laptop, his dark eyes wary. "What is it now?" he asked. "I'm starting therapy," I said, my voice steady. "And I'd like you to come with me." His brow furrowed. "Therapy? For what?" "For us," I said simply, "because I can't keep doing this alone." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Elena." "Please," I interrupted, my hazel eyes meeting his. "If you love me, you'll at least try." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. After a long pause, he nodded. "Fine, I'll go," he said. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. If this intense, provocative story left you breathless, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and let your thoughts pour out in the comments. Craving more seductive, electrifying tales? Subscribe now to stay wrapped up in every thrilling chapter and exclusive content. Your desire fuels these stories, so hit that follow button and turn on notifications. There's so much more heat to explore. Dive into the next enticing adventure and let your passions take the lead. Stay tuned, and thank you for surrendering to the story.